high atop the city of Philadelphia, on the 52nd floor of the BNY Mellon Center and the Content Club studio in the Pyramid Club of Philadelphia, this is Storytelling with a Purpose. I'm your host, Jim DeLorenzo. My goal in each episode of Storytelling with a Purpose is to share conversations that enlighten you to how storytelling works, what goes into it, and how it can move the listener, the viewer, or the reader to some action. Storytelling with a purpose, to me, is how I work with my clients, my colleagues, and my friends to bring to light stories that can connect with an intended audience in a purposeful way, making an emotional connection, capturing heart share that leads to mind share. I started telling those good stories while still in high school, and I found that public relations is my true vocation. I encourage you to reach out to me if you have any questions or would like me to tell a story for you, or if you have a story to tell me. Please feel free to contact me directly, either by cell phone at 215-266-5943 or by email at jim@jhdenterprises.com. I'm pleased to welcome my guest today, Katarina Kojic, with her interesting perspective on the role image and perception can shape interactions in business and other professional spheres. That image and confidence in that image is a key part of any public relations initiative, which is what I find an interesting storytelling perspective. As the creative director and principal photographer for her entrepreneurial venture, Hello Gorgeous, Kat works with executives to capture authentic moments and leans heavily on her background in advertising and improv to create an experience and results which are catered to their unique needs and lifestyles. As an improv consultant and facilitator, Kat teams up with individuals, coaches, and groups within companies and organizations to facilitate improv workshops that address team building, communication, and general spontaneous fun. So I'm very pleased that, Kat, we're here together today to talk about the role improv and image plays in storytelling. And we were talking earlier today about confidence in your image and confidence in your story. How did you get involved with improv to begin with? What was the impetus for you that you said, I want to be involved in improv?
Well, first, thank you so much for having me. Appreciate being here. Honestly, I'm from Chicago originally, and Chicago's home to all these different improv theaters, and I had my sights on moving to New York, but in the back of my mind, I was always like, oh, I really want to take an improv class while I live in Chicago. But, it was young. I didn't have any extra money, and I was saving it all to move to New York. So it wasn't until I moved to New York and I met somebody at a party who had just come from an improv class. I was like, oh, I've always wanted to take improv. I couldn't afford it. She's like, classes are $7. I was like, I can afford $7. So I took a class, my first class at HB Studios, which is the Uta Hagen School of Drama and Acting, and they teach all sorts of different things there, improv being one of them. And that's kind of where it started.
Wow. And that was a beginning of where did you see that becoming part of a business idea or a principle that you could apply to working with people?
Well, I did it for years without ever thinking of it outside of performative applications. And then as I got better at it, so my background at the time, I was an art director in advertising, and I was like, oh, this is really great for collaboration. And like ideation and brainstorming together, and
Sure.
That's what the game is all team working. As you work in advertising, and pretty much anywhere in the world, it's team working.
Right.
So so then it wasn't until I was in Portland 7 years ago now, and I was having a conversation with this guy from Intel. He was a consultant, and he was talking about the concept of psychological safety, which was brought up with this professor from Harvard who was introducing that concept of the importance of psychological safety for growth within teams at companies. And as he was talking about how they were trying to figure out how to bring it like to life? How do you talk about the concept in one way, but how do you experience it in another way? And everything he was talking about was, oh, you have to have shared vulnerability. Oh, well, actually in improv, you have to like be potentially wrong or put an idea out there that you don't know where it's going to go and hope that someone else adds to it.
Right.
So it was like all these different tenets of improv sort of lined up with what they were trying to do in a workshop that they had created around psychological safety. So that was kind of the first time I really thought of doing it as a business, and where I really thought, oh, people could thrive and really gain their own self-confidence within, making mistakes and having that be okay. We're all
Sure.
such perfectionists and so worried about like, looking bad and making a mistake and having the mistake actually be, I mean, there's so many examples in history of when a mistake is actually the idea,
Yes.
the final thing.
That's very interesting. I think you really hit on something there, and I'm interested the way you phrase that, because so much of what I try to do in public relations is becoming comfortable with a story, becoming comfortable with an idea, and getting buy-in, if you will, from the person I'm working with. That's we want to tell the story that will work. And having taken a few acting classes early in my career, and then doing a lot of public speaking and appearances and things, you need to have that experience so you can teach others to how to talk to the media, how to do media training, how to do public speaking. And at the same time, you have to be comfortable with your own presentation. And so much of what you're describing is, in the improv world, being able to think on your feet, if you will. I look at it in public relations as being able to think on your feet, being able to react to the situation in front of you, and being able to strategize on the fly and come up with an idea that will, I don't want to say take advantage in a bad way, but take advantage of the situation,
Sure.
so that you're in the situation you're in, you're creating a positive impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And they in comedy they say there's like this rule of threes. Something happens 3 times, it suddenly becomes funny.
Right.
Well, there's a pattern to it also. So if somebody says your name incorrectly in the scene, says Germ instead of Jim, and then the next person calls you Germ, and then the next person calls you Germ, it suddenly becomes this running gag and this
Right.
joke. So it doesn't become a mistake that the actor on his own made or that player on his own made. It becomes like this opportunity for how's Germ's house look? Is it filled with germs? Like you just find your way, and you kind of find these corners that you paint yourself into by just putting a stake down and saying whatever you're going to say with confidence, and then dealing with the consequences. And that dealing with the consequences is the fun part. It's also the really nerve-wracking part, and the part where people who are not comfortable with making mistakes will learn so much from, because you make a mistake and then you go, did anything bad happen? Like,
Sure.
did anyone lose their house? Did anyone like blow up? No,
Right.
like no one got sick. You just said something wrong, and look, it actually turned out to be hilarious.
That's interesting. You're raising the comment you made. I always hear improv being applied to comedy.
Yeah.
Is there such a thing as improv drama?
I mean, I have not experienced it myself, but for sure there is, because
Okay.
improv is not about being funny. It's about being authentic
Okay,
and being
that's
present.
perfect.
And being present.
And that's one of the things that really resonates in the PR world, is if you can be authentic in your storytelling, you can have an authentic message, something that will reach the heart.
Yeah.
And that authenticity, you can't fake the authenticity. But as you said, it's an authentic response to a situation that's unfolding before you, is what improv, and that's what makes it kind of funny and kind of fun to be involved with.
Yeah.
When you are working with the people that you work with, whether it be individuals or executives, one of the things that we were talking about earlier was the confidence in the image, confidence in telling the story, confidence in yourself and your presentation. One of the things that I found interesting about when I was first met you and we started talking was the role of photography and plays in your consulting and in your work. Can you? What is the role of photography and improv in creating the photography, the photographic images?
Well, I would start with the first part is that when depending on the assignment. So if the assignment is, I need photographs of myself to use in social media, to use on magazines, to whatever it is. It's really, and this comes from my advertising background, it's really understanding like, what is the purpose of this? Like what makes the photograph a success? It's not just, oh, I just need a simple headshot. It's like, why, if we're going to spend the time to take a photograph, it still involves setting up time, figuring out if there's a hair and makeup artist there, taking your picture, what you're going to wear. There's still like all these decisions that have to be made. If we make them thoughtfully, we'll maybe be more successful in how you can use those images. So I started to approach the way I would my advertising work, the way I would approach the people I was photographing, which is,
Okay.
who are you? Are you a daughter? Are you a son? Are you a wife? Are you a partner? Are you a teacher? Are you a dancer? Whatever all those things are. And then also like diving in really deep with understanding, like, what is the story that, like, how did you get to where you are now? How did you come up? Like the same question you're asking me,
Yep.
like, how did you develop this idea? It's like going back in time and really understanding that person's, like, that germ of an idea of where it came from.
The origin story in the comic book terms, or
Yeah.
when you described uh, the advertising background, that almost sounds like the creative brief that you do for a campaign.
For sure.
And in public relations, it's the creative strategy that you come up with, or that I come up with for my clients is what is the storytelling, and what story are we going to tell, and how are we going to tell it? One of the things that I thought was interesting in our discussions previously, you described that getting to know them, getting to know where they came from and how they got to where they are today. You described it as a therapy session. And I always look at it as a private investigator doing public relations work. I'm going to dig into the story and then I'm going to tell the story.
Yeah.
But I like your idea of the therapy session too.
I mean, I don't go into it with the idea of this is a therapy session, but I find that because of the way I'm asking questions and like, I'm so interested to know, like, I'd done a previous project on success, on understanding how people arrive at their definition of success. And that led to asking really curious questions like, where did you learn about that? And how did you learn? Like, because people will skate over these, spans of time, like with one sentence. You're like, no, but what was the very next thing that happened? Like, did
Sure.
you meet somebody? Did you get a piece of advice? Did you eat something and then you got sick? And that, whatever it is, like there's a little impetus that sort of shifted it. And it's usually multiple things, not one thing. But in their telling and their retelling of those moments, they'll be like, oh yeah, I had that one teacher
Yeah.
and I felt like such a loser in class. And they pulled me aside and was like, stop calling yourself a loser.
Yeah.
Those words mean something, so they start to feel like it's a therapy session.
Sure.
Because they're having these memories that bring up, emotion and vulnerability. And
Yeah.
that's when you get to like the real juicy the juicy stuff that will create an interesting story, an interesting photograph.
And what I think is neat about that is because in the clients that I've worked with and the successes that I've had with certain clients, I embed myself with them. I embed myself in the story. I'm with them as much as I can be to learn more about them and see how they're reacting to things. But that part that you just described of how did you get here? A lot of times, especially with entrepreneurs or small business owners, they have forgotten so much that they've never been asked those questions. They're so focused on building the business, or they're so focused on staffing or product development that origin story of how they got there to that point is so deep inside them that they don't ever have to tell anybody about it. And when someone asks them about it and someone is interested in about it, it really gives them a chance to think, I want to fall back on that. I want to go back to that and and you learn more about them, and then you can find, oh, that's a pretty good story you just told me. Have you ever told that in this forum before? And 9 times out of 10, they've never shared that story before. I've often mentioned a particular client of mine that I've worked with who had a great origin story that she had never told before.
Mm.
And once I got her to start telling that story and to feel comfortable telling that story, then people started being more attracted to her because they could relate.
Yeah.
And again,
It's authentic.
it's authentic, and it's becomes comfortable for them, and they have confidence. Going back to where we started with confidence, how do you work with people to use improv to build confidence in their image and the way they're going to project themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, in an improv class, you are given different exercises to do, and they're all making things up on the spot, right? But in varying degrees of difficulty as you
Okay.
as you progress. And there's one game that we do that is it's Hickory Dickory Dock, and each person has a line that goes with the rhythm. Hickory Dickory Dock, the mouse ran up the clock struck 1, the mouse ran down. Hickory Dickory Dock. So there's like 5 people lined up, and they get that rhythm.
Okay.
And so the first thing that we say is, make sure that you sell it with confidence. Like whatever you're going to say it with confidence. Everybody worries about the rhyme. They worry about that first. Like, it's got to rhyme. We don't care if it rhymes. We want it to make sense, and we want it to feel like we believe you. And so it's this thing of practicing different exercises where you have to deliver something with confidence, even though in your mind you're like, oh, this is so dumb. I'm gonna mess this up.
I'm going to look stupid.
I'm gonna look stupid. What's the right thing to say? What's the rhyming word? What's a rhyming word? Like, they get all caught in their head, and you have to break that down. And it is a bit of like Miyagi style, where you like doing these certain kind of motions over and over again, where you're not like, there's some rules to improv when you first start out. Like, you can't ask questions. You don't want to teach people certain things, because it puts you in a position of like safety. I'm going to take control over this situation because I don't want to look stupid. So I'm going to ask you a question and put all of the responsibility on coming up with information on you.
Okay.
But if you're a good scene partner, if you're a good team player, you offer up information. And so your team member has something to react to. So that confidence of selling it is as much about giving a piece of information and being vulnerable that it might not be something that someone's going to take. And then the other person also gifting you the confidence of taking that idea and going, yeah, we could do that. And we could also do this, And so that Hickory Dickory Dock rhythm goes back to like, there's 5 parts to that rhythm, and each person is responsible for one little part of it. So you just have to focus on your part, and you're going to get this lovely little story at the end of it.
That's great. That's a great way to describe it. We're talking about the events that you're doing and some of the classes that you're going to be offering. I would love to get involved with that. I'm going to get involved with that. But it's interesting that you go back to the Hickory Dickory Dock idea. I had never heard that before, but it makes sense to me. You're all contributing to part of the story.
Yeah. And I'm not going to be able to come up with a good example of what that will look like right now. There's only 4 of us in the room. I need 5 people.
Understood.
But it's going back to that, like, sometimes you have to fake it till you make it. And so when you're asking like, what's the correlation between improv and photography? When people are getting photographed, like, you could be the CEO of a company that you are a boss about, and you are confident in that boardroom. You're confident when you're leading your people, but you get that person behind a camera or in front of a camera, and they suddenly are like this, not confident or overly confident and exuding something weird and it's not natural to be photographed. It's a weird thing, So my job is to make them feel like they're comfortable enough that they can be themselves, their authentic selves. So I use my my improv training to like connect with people. It's not that they're doing an improv in front of the camera.
Sure.
Although sometimes I've asked someone to pretend that they're a champagne bubble, and that creates a hilarious, it's disarming. So you find different like techniques. It's going to be different for each person because each person is, you have to connect with each person where they're at. And sometimes that's not where they're going to be at. They're
Sure.
not going to be willing to be a champagne bubble, but maybe you'll find another way of connecting with them.
It's interesting you describe how uncomfortable people can be. I come from a bit of a photography background in that my father had a camera shop in downtown Trenton, New Jersey for 50 years. So I was exposed to cameras and photography and film throughout my childhood and throughout my teen years. And I was always around him. And it seemed like every waking moment of my life till I was about 21 years old was being photographed by my father or my mother. So I have these tons of old photos that chronicle almost every moment of my life. So I became very comfortable with being on camera, but that's not something that happens naturally for a lot of people. And in my work, I have found, especially in when I was hiring professional photographers to do a large scale photo shoot of like athletes from a particular team at Villanova or executives at a certain company, that puts a lot of pressure on people because they see the photographer all set up and they see the lights and they see the background and
they don't know what to do with their hands.
Right. They don't know what to do with their hands. They're not doing the Jack Donaghy with the mugs kind of thing. But there was this discomfort and you really couldn't coach them out of it. At least I couldn't at that time in my career. And then I found that the rise of the cell phone and the smartphone, using that as a camera, has led to a certain comfort level with people of being on camera. And then there's a certain level of people who say, no, I never want to be on camera. But one of the things I think is interesting about photography, the use of photography and video today, is that so many of us are now taking photos with our smartphones, our cell phones.
Yeah.
And so many of us are putting images up on Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter, X, Threads, that we are becoming more and more used to the idea of doing those things. But at the same time, we're not staging things. We're doing authentic, spur of the moment things.
Yeah.
Some of them are staged, obviously, like with your influencers and things like that. But it's interesting to me how more and more people are comfortable with photography to a certain extent than they were ever before. And when I'm teaching, when I'm coaching media training and public speaking, I use the example of how when a lot of us were growing up, we were always told there's a permanent record and this is going to be a mark in your permanent record. And there was no permanent record. There was no permanent record when I was growing up. It was just a threat. But since like 1998, 1999, now there's a permanent record.
Yeah.
And part of that permanent record is that you're on camera almost everywhere you go, whether you realize it or not. So that image that you're presenting, that's why I don't go out of the house on Monday through Friday without a tie on, or have a suit coat on. I try to realize that people are going to see me, and that's the image I want to project. Is that the same thing that you're seeing, or you're sharing with people that are going through your improv and your photography coaching, as far as like how to present an image, how to be confident in that image, and use that image to kind of sell their story?
I mean, I would say that one thing is that these phones are very unintimidating.
Mm.
They don't, like, it's not a long lens with a thing on it where you suddenly feel like you're in a movie, and it is quite different, the difference in how people feel between, oh, let me take a cell phone picture. Oh, now it's serious. Now now you're taking really pictures. You're like getting my pores, So that part, I would say, hasn't changed that much. I think that, honestly, people just want to feel at ease. They want to know that they're doing the right thing. And with digital photography, what's so great is that, like, I don't show all the pictures. We just pick a couple. So, like, you don't have to worry about that. There's not going to be like just like there's a rhythm with the shutter. So maybe like
Sure.
change it up every time you hear the shutter click, you change your position, things like that, like some mechanical things like that. But for the most time, I'm kind of trying to capture people like almost as a documentary portrait photographer where
Okay.
they don't necessarily know like this is the moment that you're going to snap the camera.
Right.
Some people really understand how it works and they know their angles and they know how to like get their face in the light. That's far and few between. I usually photograph people who have told me I've never gotten a picture of myself that I've liked. I hate every picture I've ever
Okay.
taken. So it's nice to know that they're getting disarmed with me. And I think part of that is just my personality, but I do think that a lot of it comes from the improv training that I have, which is just to meet people where they're at, to be really present with them and to make them feel like whatever they're doing is the right thing.
Sure.
Because that's how you feel like if you're in a good improv.
Okay. And sharing that confidence and helping people be confident in the image that they share with you that they want to project or they want to deliver. How do you help them build that confidence? How do you, because the name of your company is Hello Gorgeous, which I love. I'm gonna divert here. How did you come up with the name Hello Gorgeous for your business?
Well, it used to be called mise en scène photo shoots,
Okay.
which is a really, really long word that most people don't know what the hell that means.
Gotcha.
But a mise en scène means like it's the environment of it's a filmmaking term.
Sure.
So it's the environment, it's all the things. It's the way things look, the way things sound, what food is there, what your environment is on a set. So for me, I felt like I was creating these mise en scènes for each particular person so that we could get what we needed out of them. So
Right.
if they were really like, if there was someone who I knew was going to respond well to like people fussing over them, then I would let people know, like, let's really make sure that we're paying attention to them and giving them a lot of like care and
Right.
taking care of themselves, making sure like, oh, this tie is just a little bit off. Like it does make a difference in the
Sure.
final photograph, but it also makes the person feel really seen. And that's
Right.
another function of improv.
Okay.
When you yes and someone's idea, they feel like, oh, my idea was pretty good because they're doing something with it. So it's like there's this sort of give and take to both things. And getting photographed is a very collaborative event. It's us responding to each other. So I totally just lost what your original question was.
I was thinking it came from Funny Girl, but maybe.
Oh, where did Hello Gorgeous come from? Yeah, that's a common question. So I was doing mise en scène photo shoots, and then I was doing a big party for all of my clients to have them show their pictures and have people come and ooh and ah over their pictures. So we had a slideshow going of all the pictures, and the event was called Hello Gorgeous Soiree. And so I had a friend that every person that came in, she was from India, and she had this great accent. She was like, "Hello, gorgeous." And so every person that would walk in, she'd be like, "Hello, gorgeous. What's your name?" And she'd take them down, and everyone felt like great. So it was just like creating this whole environment. So
Sure.
when mise en scène wasn't really working so much and was really getting a lot of blank looks from people when you told them the name of your company, I decided to change it to Hello Gorgeous. So
And
that's
that I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. That's a great origin story.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that with me.
Yeah.
You came to Philadelphia about a year ago from Portland, Oregon. You're starting your business here. You're working your way into the community and you're doing things. What has been a big challenge for you in moving from the West Coast to the East Coast and taking a business that you had established and bringing it to a different city and kind of recreating yourself in a different market, if you will?
Yeah. Well, the company started in New York, and then I was in New York for 20 years, and then I moved to Portland,
Right.
and then I moved here. So it actually feels easier to be back on the East Coast.
Okay.
Because originally it was Hello Gorgeous NYC. And I've kind of dropped the NYC since I'm not in New York anymore, but it does feel like it was very much born out of, in New York, everything has to have more than one use
Sure.
to it, has to have more than one purpose. So it's kind of fitting that my business is both improv and photography. It's like
Okay.
all the things that help you feel gorgeous about yourself. So the biggest challenge I think is really just, getting your name out there and networking with people and, creating different opportunities for people to know your work. I work from out of my home. And so most of my clients are, I photograph them at their
Sure.
location or at their business. And then now I'm going to start doing an improv workshop that I'm doing next week. And then I've got a class that I'm going to be doing that's going to be in person. So those are my first forays of doing in-person stuff on my own here.
Okay.
So I'm excited
The,
about that.
the event is Network Schmetwork,
Yep.
and it's in Philadelphia on September 6th.
Yep.
What's going to happen that night?
So it's basically bringing people together. We're going to do some improv games, and people will understand like the function of better listening and collaboration and storytelling, and kind of getting out of your head, getting out of your own way. And then we're going to do a networking portion, or the schmetworking portion of the event around the corner at Chicks. So people will get to practice what they've learned. So it's geared towards people who are singles, entrepreneurs, small business owners, freelancers, all the people who like need to work with a lot of different people
Sure.
in different paces.
And a lot of different people who you're interacting with on the fly,
Yeah.
on your feet,
Yeah.
thinking on your feet, improv.
Yeah.
And then leading into that, you have a program called From Awkward to Awesome that you're kicking off.
Yes. From awkward to awesome. The full name of it is, I have to look it up because it's a long name. You can cut this, right? You can edit this. So
a
it makes it-
transformative 8-week improv journey with pictures to prove it.
That's the one. I've just started talking about it. So yeah, this is the first time I'm going to be doing this. To me, I've always wanted to bring together improv and photography and see that there is a difference. There's a transformation in how you can feel when you're getting photographed, but also even if you weren't photographed, there's a boost in your confidence. So we're asking people to bring in a photo of themselves from childhood. We're taking a photograph of them at the start of class, and then we have 8 weeks of improv classes, and then we'll do another professional photo shoot at the end of the class. So they'll have like this whole transformative journey. And Laura Parker is also a stylist in in Philadelphia, and she's going to do a virtual styling session with everybody.
Wonderful.
So yeah.
And do you find that people are, as you said, people who say, I don't like any of the pictures that have been taken me in the past, or I'm very uncomfortable getting pictures taken. What is the first step that you take to help them gain confidence in that process, and then help them gain confidence? And is there one quick thing that you do?
I think, well, it starts way before they get on set. It starts with the first conversation of really caring about why they want the pictures and why it's important to them. And I think that building from there, we're then going like, okay, then what kind of clothes are you going to bring to the shoot? What are we going to, what are you going to wear? What are you trying to present about yourself? I usually ask for like, what are 3 to 5 adjectives that you want the picture to say about yourself?
Okay.
So people get a sense of like, I want it to be quirky, or I want it to be, everybody says professional. So what does professional mean, right? So everybody's profession is slightly different. So if it's like, I want people to think like I'm bold and I'm fashionable and I'm professional, those are 3 different adjectives than professional, quirky, and approachable, right? So they're little tweaks, but just even having those adjectives in your head makes a big difference.
Sure.
Of like feeling confident in the person that's taking your picture. Like, we're in this together, we're creating this, we're co-creating this. And I didn't do this when I first started out, but I tend to show people the pictures like early on.
Sure.
So that they can see like, oh, I look amazing.
Right.
And then they relax, and then they're like, okay. And then the really great pictures. I mean, they do look amazing in those first couple pictures usually, but it's really like then the authentic, they like relax, and you get lots of different variations.
And that being relaxed, comfortable, generates confidence.
Yeah.
And that also lends itself to being confident in the image you're projecting and the story that you're going to tell with that image. Do you look to, you talked about mise en scene, and you talked about the storytelling aspect, but is there a particular element that you think doesn't work in that type of setting? With is there something that you've seen in people's pictures that you say, "Ooh, that's I wouldn't have done that"? I can think back of one that I did years ago, which was kind of like a takeoff on something the Los Angeles Lakers did in Sports Illustrated 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and I can remember thinking, "Boy, that photo was a jerky photo that we went with. You know, that was not the best photo that we could have done." And I kind of even now I'm thinking about it, I'm getting mad at myself. But I was like 25 years old when I
Yeah,
did it. You know.
yeah. I mean, I think so. Your question is there something that makes the photo particularly bad?
Yeah.
Honestly, I think it comes down to the lighting.
Okay.
Everybody, like, knowing your lighting and knowing what works on your subject is a big part of it. It's like, not every lighting is going to be great for everybody. Some people, they're Miss America, they're going to look great in every lighting. But even they will have potentially
Sure.
terrible pictures, right? The down low, chin stuck in picture, whatever. So for me, it's a lot about lighting and making sure that the lighting is set up. Even if you're doing natural light, it's like making sure that the environment, again, going back to mise en scène, that the environment is the right setting for what we're trying to get. Because in some cases, you want someone to look grizzled.
Sure.
You want someone to look like browbeaten. That's maybe the point of the picture. In other instances, most of the time, it's like, how do you look on your best day?
That's interesting because it seems like people's LinkedIn photos, for example, and we talked about this earlier. The LinkedIn photo for some people is really like can be really cheesy.
Yeah.
And you look at it and you go, why did they use that photo? And then there's others that are professionally done, but they still look kind of cheesy.
Yeah.
And then there's others that look really, really good. But it's interesting to see who has the cheesiest photos, who has the semi-cheesy photos, and who has the really good photos. And it really, having been a student of LinkedIn for many years now, it seems like there's no one real indicator of how that person's picture is going to look. Like if they have this particular title, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the best looking photo that they have.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's multiple factors. I think it's like having confidence and having a true sense of collaboration with the person that's photographing you, having like, which then will lead to they're going to have good light, they're going to know what they're doing, but having those early conversations early on of like, what is the message that we're trying to send out? Even if you're doing like, if you're going back to improv, if you're in a scene and you're doing a show, you get a suggestion from the audience, right? That becomes the theme of that scene. So everyone's yes-anding that suggestion and creating something. So again, like what's the anchor for this photograph? What's the point of it?
I like the idea of scene setting and creating that scene, creating that context for the photo.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea. And I think a lot of people can learn from that. And that also, as you said, builds confidence, builds comfort level, and it lets people who are the subject of the photo, as you said, lets them feel like they've been heard.
Yeah.
Someone's paying attention to them.
Yeah.
I like that the hello gorgeous back, comes back to you. It's like, hello gorgeous. And no one's ever called me gorgeous before. that could be kind of motivating, inspiring.
Yeah. And it's very much not about the visual, even though gorgeous sounds like it's very surface. It's not. It's hello gorgeous is really about authenticity and confidence and just being the best version of yourself. And
Sure.
so for me, the way you get that is through improv and photography.
What has been the one thing about improv that you've learned over the years that you would never expected to be as important as it was? Is there one particular area of improv that you have found has been?
I think the making mistakes is what rises the cream,
Okay.
the cream that rises to the top of my brain. I think like I still find myself wanting, I'm good at improv, so I know how to do a scene, etc. But even I still, if I don't think I trust the other player, I'm much more reserved and much less likely to want to make a mistake. So, so to speak. And that's that's too bad, because the mistake is where so much fun is. So it's like not, it's like lifting any judgment that you have on yourself and on other people
Yeah,
that creates like this freedom and new possibility.
I like that. There's an old Catholic theological uh, theory of the fortunate fault, and it refers to original sin. If there wasn't for original sin, if Adam and Eve hadn't committed, in the mythology and in the theology, if Adam and Eve hadn't committed the sin of picking from the tree of knowledge, eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge, then Jesus wouldn't have come to earth, was born as our Savior. If we didn't have that mistake, we wouldn't have had Jesus as our Savior. So making a mistake can open up a lot of possibilities and bring you to a very happy place.
Yeah.
A fortunate fault is the philosophy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look at that. Jesus was an improvisation.
Yes. Oh, I think he was one of the best improvs ever, according to the Bible, at least. It seems like he did a lot of improv.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever used Jesus as an improv example before, but
I don't know that I've ever gotten that as a suggestion for an improv either.
it could be pretty interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've gone from comic books and photography to Jesus and sports. If people wanted to track you down, your website is
hellogorgeous.nyc.
okay. And I really appreciate you taking the time to be with me today and be with our audience. I think improv, I even before we met, I would have not considered it using the term improv, but I always refer to it as thinking on your feet.
Yeah.
But I think that that's exactly what it is. It's being comfortable in the situation and knowing how to work in the environment that's in front of you.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be taking your classes. I'm in one way or another. I'm going to be there this fall to take part in this. But I really am very inspired by our discussion today, and I hope our audience is as well.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this was a lot of fun.
Well, I want to thank you again, and I thank you for watching and listening, and I look forward to seeing you all again here very, very soon.